Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. Excited to welcome Grant Venerable to the show from Art Molecular Concepts. Excited that he's here to join us, and I get to know him today. And so will you in our podcast. How are you doing today, Grant?
Very well.
Great. Well, it's a pleasure having you here in the studio and looking forward to getting to know you further. I know things related by patterns of belief. We're going to address a little bit about that as experimental systems under investigation by lifelong experimental scientists. And you're going to discuss a little bit about this. But before we get into the core of this, let's find out a little bit about you since you are new to me, vice versa. Okay. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
I'm a writer. Mostly these days, and I'm really writing about my life, how I got from point A when I was born in Los Angeles to the present day where I am on the Mojave Desert.
Wow.
And overviewing what life has been about. I've worked in about, I think, 8 states. My career, which has included a stint in Silicon Valley industry, in the 1980s, and then back to academia in the 1990s. I finished my degrees at UCLA in 1965 in chemistry, and then University of Chicago, PhD in 1970. And then I went from there into a great unknown journey I had no idea I was in for. But I graduated very, maybe appropriately in the middle of a almost depression. It was a recessed economy. Nobody was hiring anyone in the academic world. It went from people with my background getting 4 or 5 offers to getting none, not even to getting an interview. So I was thrown up against the dark side of life very early, and was thrown upon my own creativity just to get by, and against my own stubbornness, because had all of the academic pride of Chicago, which is like a quasi Ivy League university, but I had to make it, and I taught high school for a year. Didn't know I was going to do that, but it's a good thing I did. And then I taught at the Cal Poly State University in San Luis Obispo for 6 years. That was a wonderful experience. It wasn't perfect, but it was wonderful. And there to UC Santa Cruz for 2 years, and then out onto the desert of my existence with getting part-time jobs. Some were pretty good, and others were minimum wage, $5.50 an hour jobs. But I lost a lot of false pride, where I had to have a certain income. But I did learn so much about life and how to work with people I had not worked with. I was worked for the water district in Oakland, California, and worked in a clerical pool. So I was doing clerical chores. But I was around people who were what we call the working class. And that's really, I think, where I got my honing, my refinement in dealing with human beings, period.
Yeah.
And then from there back to teaching at San Francisco State University. Then I took off to the Chicago State. I was an administrator in 3 universities as a associate vice president, and then a academic vice president in Morris Brown College in Atlanta, Georgia, and then Lincoln University in Pennsylvania. So that's the formalities involved.
Wow.
But I mean, the rest of it is understanding what causes my life experience.
Yeah.
And I realized there's even more to it than that. And there's been much talk, many studies on how our subconscious mind really shapes our reality. But most of us live as though we don't know that.
Mm-hmm.
And we act that as though material knowledge and logic are all that's necessary. And I'm finding now that's only about 4%
Yeah.
of what shapes your lived experience. So once I tapped that mystery, I began to pursue experiences where I got more understanding of that. And life, I didn't try, but life put me around
Yeah.
very skilled psychologists.
Mm-hmm.
And that was more learning, just being around people like that who understood that deep subconscious mind and how I could utilize mine to optimize my experienced existence.
Wow.
So that's it. A part of
Beautiful.
that was religious.
Yeah.
So I understand religion much more now, and that's probably of great fascination to many people. But I'm finding religion is not what I thought it was. I mean, there's traditional practices of it, which I do.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily relate to it in the same way that other people relate to theirs. So this past few weeks has been about truly getting seriously honest that we shape our own existences and experience. We come here by ourselves.
Yeah.
We have parents. We go through years. At some point, we leave here. But between those two portals, in and out, that's when all of the refinements, the shaping takes place. And I can see now pretty much I've ducked a lot of unfortunate experiences, but I survived them because I had a lot of undesirable experiences that I had to learn by my raw intelligence and risk-taking abilities to get through it and survive.
Beautiful.
So that leads me to the notes that I made for you that focuses on key items in my survival.
Well, thank you for giving us this overview. We're going to talk more about what you're doing and a little bit about you mentioned must a young person attend college and get a degree in order to get a good job?
And that I had no clue about. That was not why I went to college. I went to college because that's what was done in my family.
Yeah.
Is you go to college. And then once I got to college, I discovered some of the most interesting curricular moments I could ever have done that I would not have gotten without going to college.
Yeah.
And then at some point, I got aware that there's engineering possibilities. They offered certain salaries, but I wasn't even worried about a salary. That's how backward or unusual
or forward or
I'm glad I didn't go into college to get a job.
Yeah.
Because that meant I could focus on what UCLA offered, not just in the classroom, but in co-curricular activities like getting to know as many people, fellow students from outside my particular heritage and background that I could. And that was worth diamonds, more than diamonds and gold right there. But I was part of their experience as well.
Yeah.
At some point, I decided in my first couple of years at UCLA, I wanted to be a teacher. In fact, I wanted to be a professor. I didn't have that hope before, but I had particular mentors who inspired me, and that's how that happened. So I got involved in undergraduate research by doing pretty well in my classes and doing research into unknown, simple little projects, discovering some new facts about molecular systems, how they absorb light, how they re-emit light that they have absorbed.
Okay.
And youngsters at that age really, at least at that time, were very involved in each other's lives. They were
Mm-hmm.
very interested in one another. And we discovered that some of us were wanting to go to med school, law school, dental school, or graduate school.
Yeah.
And so I was with the people that got interested in going to grad school to do research. Again, not for a job, but I just assumed I would get a job as a professor
Yeah.
once I finished.
Mm-hmm.
And I did, but it didn't always go to plan according to a
Does it
plan.
ever? But that's what makes it
Well, that's what I
interesting.
discovered.
Yes, I want
Nothing
to
really
hear.
ever worked by a plan.
Mm-hmm.
So that meant emphasizing other types of skills,
Yeah. Yeah.
which I did emphasize.
And so you mentioned, you have this scientific method that you can apply, right? Because some of us,
That's right.
yeah, I would love to hear a little bit about this and this whole conditioning in a
Well,
sense where we're told to go to college and yeah,
that was key to it.
yeah,
It meant everything I engaged with, whether it was in the career sector, the personal sector,
yeah.
the religious sector,
Mm-hmm.
the recreational sector, whatever it was. I learned how. I gave myself permission to experiment with different kinds of opportunities, to experiment with negative events that would come up, to
Yeah.
experiment, to test what these events were
Mm-hmm.
about and how I could
Yeah.
get through them. And the first opportunity came by getting from a job I really loved, teaching. And that that was a shock because professors are not supposed to be fired. That's
No.
just it's a practice and it's a belief. But in that situation was a little bit unusual,
Mm-hmm.
and they really didn't watch my back like you're supposed to with young first year faculty members somewhere. So I had to learn how to
Yeah.
deal with situations like that.
Mm-hmm.
But it led to what's called taking responsibility for what happens to me. And I got involved with a process. We call it human growth training, things like that,
Okay.
exercises and how we make decisions. And like, okay, tell your partner a story about the worst thing that happened to you in the last 6 to 9 months.
Mm-hmm.
So my worst thing was getting fired. And I was still pretty upset about that. But part of the exercise was tell your story again, but tell it in a way in which you take responsibility for
Mm-hmm.
what happened to you.
Exactly.
If
Yeah,
you
you
got
have to.
fired, what was how did you happen to bring that about? And that I said, oh, I see what's coming off here. Life just isn't something you slide through with ease. You have to look ahead to see how do your decisions and actions affect what's going to happen ahead. And that never happened to me again. Either if I wasn't going to make it in that position, begin to plan how to find another one and do it with enough time or completely change. So you don't hear much about that in the area of the evening news. All you hear about is all the people out looking for jobs that don't exist. And for me, it was if I didn't leave a job, it meant I wasn't doing something right. So don't stay too long. Find something that will renew you. So my memoir is full of that kind of strategy.
Amazing. And did you want to dive a little further into some other childhood stories I was reading about before? In regards to, was it your father, I believe? Or was it, it was your father there
My
was
father
about
had a
yes, the slide rule.
great influence on me and my sister and brother. In fact, one reason I moved to the desert, all of us siblings decided to move to the desert
Wow.
in this Yucca Valley area, California, above Southern California, and participate more in with our father's alma mater at Caltech in Pasadena. Well, that was a story in itself. I didn't know I was living with this man who had such great intellectual, I'll just call it genius. That's what it was. He also had a background that was quite diverse in
Okay.
itself. There's a real fascinating word today, diversity. But that's what the
Yes.
family was about, was diversity, equity, opportunity, inclusiveness. Whatever he didn't have, he learned how to get it. And then he passed that along to his children. If you're not getting something you want, don't complain. Go get it. So that's what we did. So they named a residence hall after him at Caltech. So that's Venerable House.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the students that live there just loved being a part of the Venerable family and connecting with that house. Now that really gets to the items that I wanted to share about.
Go ahead.
And whatever you'd like to learn more about in terms of that.
Well, I'm excited because it's my first time getting to work with you, to talk to you. So I know some of the listeners may already be familiar with you and your work, but there's a lot. You mentioned Murphy's Law in your notes. I want to talk about that. If it's up to you, I don't know what order you want to go in, but that predicts that anything can go wrong, right? At any time.
Yeah, I'd love it.
Could you talk a little bit about that?
as much as you want to take on.
Go ahead. Tell us a little bit about it. Yeah.
The thing about Murphy's Law is that it's a pun on science. It isn't a scientific law, but it's something we in science and engineering do a lot of kidding about. Well, don't worry about that experience. According to Murphy's Law, it's probably not going to work.
Mm-hmm.
So, but what I had instead of Murphy's Law was looking at recognizing that as a manifestation of two or three vital laws in the physical science world.
Yeah.
And they involve some of the greatest names in 19th and 20th century science.
Wow.
And one of those names is, of course, Mr. Einstein. But even before Einstein was a man named Boltzmann, and a man named Maxwell, and a gentleman named Gibbs. And they were instrumental in telling us why chemical reactions, or why galactic behaviors of galaxies and stars, why they act the way they do. It all comes down to two very important laws. One is the Gibbs free energy law, and the other is the Boltzmann entropy law. Entropy is the amount of disorder in the universe.
Mm-hmm.
And Boltzmann's law is based upon how order and disorder affect the energy changes in a chemical system. Now that sounds very technical, but it is technical. It's technical, and it enables us to understand things in the chemical world, the astrophysics world, the biology worlds, all of that. So what I'm about now is, how do I now educate the public as much as possible on the importance of these laws? They're not that strange in any way, but they all have their place. All that started when I was in grade school in Los Angeles, which had one of the greatest school systems in the country at way back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, into the 70s. But they were creating a lot of the people who went into Nobel Prize work, who went to Stanford, they went to UCLA, Berkeley, Caltech, other places in California. The little story I think that's really instructive here is I loved how to get my father to teach me things in mathematics. He did such a perfect job, but it's one way that he bonded with his children is by helping them with their homework where they needed it. But he loved to help in mathematics and science.
Yeah.
And he used the slide rule in his own work. Well, we hardly ever see slide rules anymore.
I know, right?
But they contain all of the fundamental ideas and laws governing exponential numbers and logarithms. The society is hardly conversant with logarithms and exponentials. So it limits society's understanding of those concepts. But that's how you deal with magnitudes that are too hard to think about in our common minds or too small to think about. So we use these surrogate tools to grapple with them. So I said,
you're like, wait,
Daddy, I want you to teach me the slide rule. So I see him using it all the time. He says, well, I'm going to put you off on that because I want you to learn how to use exponentials, logarithms before I show you the slide rule. So I said, okay. So by the 11th grade, I had learned logarithms and exponentials. The slide rule operation is based upon logarithms and exponentials. He said, if you don't get the concepts first, it's not going to make much difference if you learn the slide rules, because you have to learn how to determine the size of your answer on your own. You have to have enough brain power to do that on your own. Same with handheld calculators. By the time I was professoring in Cal Poly, I tried to limit the use of handheld calculators to solve chemical physics calculations until students understood the magnitude of the answer. Like if they got an answer on the calculator that said 2.58, 2.583, then I said, well, the answer isn't 2.583. It's actually 2,583. So how did you miss that?
Yeah.
They didn't have the intuition, but they had the little handheld device that gave them the digits. But they couldn't check to realize the digits had the wrong decimal place.
Oh.
So they didn't know it was 2,000 instead of 2.583. That's a big difference. That's half the knowledge, is knowing the size. Well, the same thing we have now on our hands is a little thing called AI.
Yeah.
Everybody's hearing about AI. Now, I don't know how to do computer coding of AI, but I certainly know what's up with it. And that if you don't know what you're doing or what the AI is doing for you or to you, you're not going to imagine what it's really serving up to you. But AI, in a way, I know some of my technical colleagues will say, no, it isn't, but I will say it. It's a slide rule and a handheld calculator, but in a far more glorious form. It calculates whatever it is you want to calculate so fast and with so many figures to calculate with. You think that it's some kind of out of this world artificial intelligence. And it is, but it isn't. So if the professor just lets you run off with AI without knowing what you're doing, it could be the kiss of you know what.
Mm-hmm.
If you're looking at a response you get
Death,
and you
yeah.
don't know how AI is getting that, so now we can't turn on the internet without the AI showing news feeds that are relevant to what we're interested in, because AI already has the data of what we're watching in movies and TV and entertainments. So it just feeds you all that back.
Yeah.
And it does it so fast, you think that, oh, this thing is really intelligent. And it isn't. It's just processing information and data so in depth and so fast, you don't know what it's doing.
Yeah. Wow.
So that's a little point way back to teenage that's come back to my interests in senior age to see what's happening to the entire society. And we're just cocooning and limiting, putting a roof over the knowledge that people can learn by not understanding the guts of the system. Well, that makes us vulnerable to whoever wants our votes.
True, right? It's
and
so
knows
true.
how to use AI to give us an impression using operant conditioning, which Sigmund Freud told us about, one of the first Westerners to talk about that, and then Carl Jung to talk about. So that's where I've been coming from, is using science to help people understand how the society's changes are really reflecting what we're doing to ourselves or letting others do to ourselves without our recognizing that.
Beautiful. Well,
so
unfortunately,
that
we are out of time. My goodness, it goes so quick. We have to kind of wrap it up. I'm so sorry.
Well, we've covered everything I'd hoped to cover.
Good.
And the names. So you could look up the names on here, like Boltzmann, Einstein, Maxwell, Gibbs, and Murphy's Law.
Beautiful.
So it's I think that's a good wrap up right there.
I think it's great. Thank you. How can we reach out to you?
So yeah.
How can we contact you?
On ventwo@aol.com. And also look up on Amazon at the title of my memoir, Footprints in the Chaotic Unknown, which is where we find ourselves now. But I started writing it back before I retired in 2011. I didn't know it was going to point to where we are in 2025.
Wow.
But it is. So that's why it's important to really check it out.
Beautiful.
It's not just words. It has photographs also.
Great. Well, thank you again for being here and for joining us. We'll have to pick up a copy. Thank you again. Looking forward to the next time we connect. Pleasure having you here in the studio today. Thank you so much. Great getting to know you. Hopefully we connect again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Hi, this is Terry Crews, actor, former football player, game show host, father of 5, and all-around big dude. I'm also an expert on drama. I know all kinds of drama. There's the good kind that comes with having a house full of kids. There's the bad kind, like season-ending injuries. There's the necessary kind, like having an agent in Hollywood. And there's silly drama, like the drama around my percolating pectorals. And then there's the drama you can skip.
Skip the drama that comes with not having your high school diploma or equivalency. Find free adult education classes near you and finish your high school diploma. Visit finishyourdiploma.org.
Or text diploma to 97779. Message and data rates may apply. Reply STOP to opt out. That's diploma to 97779. And leave the drama to actors like me.
Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.